Good morning, good day, good evening, good night, wherever you dial in. We appreciate you dialing in for another one of our Sunday School series. So today we're looking at session 10, and it's called Accused. Okay, so we're a little bit different. We skipped a chapter because we're going from chapter 37 when the the brothers, really wanted to kill Joseph, but they instead wanted to make profit off for getting rid of him, and they sold him into slavery. Joseph ends up going down to with his caravan down to Egypt, and there he's bought by a servant of Pharaoh named Potiphar, who needed a servant for his household. So he brought him in, and so that's where we are with Joseph. Now, chapter 38 deals with some nonsense and some other lessons with the family, marrying, intermarrying, that kind of stuff. And we're not going to get into it because it's not addressed with the Bible lessons for this series. But it's worth to look and read what's going on when Joseph's out of the picture. So now we jump ahead to chapter 39. And like I said, we see that Joseph has been bought by Potiphar. He's brought to the house and quickly rises to be one of his most trusted, faithful, and hardworking servants. Okay, so that's where we are, and that's where we're going to start. Now, when we get into this, we start looking at the Bible lesson. We kind of get an idea because we're talking about accused, and if you're familiar with the story of Joseph and Potiphar's wife, that this is what this lesson's all about. But I want to point out something with Holman real quick with this lesson before all this gets started. Okay, so when we look at this, I'm going to read this real quick. Joseph rose through the various ranks of Potiphar's servants to become a chief steward in Potiphar's household. The rise in position was in relation to his relationship with the Lord. It is twice stated the Lord was with Joseph, and further that the Lord gave him success in everything he did. The fact that Joseph lived in the house of an Egyptian master would be significant when temptation came. Potiphar was blessed because of Joseph, in keeping with the Abrahamic promise that I will bless those who bless you. Remember what God said to Abraham. Okay, so all of this going forward with Joseph is very important. God has not abandoned his promise to his forefather. So that's very important for us to remember. I'll bless those who bless you, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. The blessings to Potiphar extended beyond what Joseph had immediately contacted with everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. Because of this, Joseph was in charge of everything. In the house, Potiphar did not concern himself with anything except the food that he ate. Wow, that's how much trust that, and I wanted to read that to you to kind of give you an idea, to remind us that this covenant that God made with Abraham is still alive. It's still, God's holding on to that even after Abraham's gone and moving forward. God has not given up on his promise to that faithful servant. And he's serving and holding to that promise through another faithful servant, which is Joseph. So very interesting. It's something to keep in our minds, to keep in the back of our mind that God is still active with the promises that he made. Now, okay, after some time, this master's wife looked longingly at Joseph and said, "Sleep with me." But he refused. "Look," he said to the master's wife, "with me and my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put all that he owned under my authority. No one in his house is greater than I am. He has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. So how could I do this immense evil? How could I sin against God?" Although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her. So after a time means that there was some time in between him being bought and brought in. Joseph has made his way up to this position. It may have been a couple of months, may have been a couple of years, but bottom line is he has been in this household for quite some time. And it seems like at some point in time, Potiphar's wife said, I like that. I like that young man. So that's what we're seeing here after some time. So that it shows that it wasn't right away. It was something that can build up. Potiphar obviously got the trust through with Joseph over time, and Joseph has proven himself to be a loyal servant to him. And so there was some time that passed in between. Now we look at sleep with me. Even the centuries before God gave Israel the Mosaic Law at Sinai, Joseph understood that sex outside the covenant of marriage was wrong. So we see that early on that the laws that Moses brought down from the mountain were not the first time that they seen or heard of this. God was speaking to them, and of course he spoke through Abraham, and Abraham spoke it through his sons, Jacob and Esau, and Jacob, later Israel, would also do that with his sons, as the patriarch at the time is also the chief priest of the family. So we see that Jacob is very much aware that sleeping with this married woman would be wrong. And that's what he's pointing out here. He's saying, look, I got the authority over everything in this house but you. I have not been given permission to sleep with you, nor do I want that. So he's pointing that out, and he's given that. So he's got a lot of authority, but that authority does not extend to Potiphar's wife. It's what he calls an immense evil. He's looking at how could I sin against God? So it's not just the servant. Potiphar as his master, but he's also talking about his God, which is very important, is it not? So he's saying it suggests any condition or action that is unacceptable in God's sight. So he knew right off the bat, this is wrong and I can't do that. Day after day, this phrase emphasized repeated nature of the temptation. Potiphar's wife persisted in her attempts to lure Joseph into wrongdoing. The expression underscores the reality of daily pressure to conform. We are serious about our faith. Christians need to rely on God's Spirit when dealing with temptation. Amen. So we see that day after day, Joseph has to continually deal with this woman hitting on him, trying to sleep with him. So that is a problem. But day after day, he remains steadfast and strong. So, question: how do people often try to rationalize or make excuses for sin? Oh, wow, that's kind of a loaded question, is it not? A lot of times we try to rationalize our sin, justify it one way or another, or we try to justify, it's the lesser of two evils, so to speak. We try to justify it with the ideology of God is love, and we forget about the consequences of sin. We see that it's so prevalent in our society where we justify or try to excuse something sinful, and it just becomes just a daily transaction, so to speak, and we don't think about it. So we try to rationalize that. Well, everybody else is doing it, and why can't I? But the fact of the matter is, if it's sin, it's sin. Now, Genesis 39:11, we're moving on. Now, one day when he went into the house to do his work, so he went inside the house, and none of the servants were there, she grabbed him by the garment and said, "Sleep with me." So now she's being a little bit more forceful. Where we were seeing it as a suggestion, now we're seeing it where she's taking action. She is getting physical with it. But leaving his garment in her hand, he escaped and ran outside. So he fled the temptation. He didn't argue with her. By now, she probably knew that he was not going to do it, and she was being desperate. He probably knew there's nothing I can say or do, but I just need to flee this. She's gotten to a point that she's scaring me. So when she grabbed his garment, it was better for him to let that garment go and flee and run from that temptation. So he left it there and escaped and ran outside. When she saw he had left his garment with her and had run outside, she called her household servants. Remember, she was in there alone in the house with him. And now that he fled, she's got this garment. She called the household servants with him. "Look," she said to them, "my husband brought a Hebrew man to make fools of us. He came to me so he could sleep with me, and I screamed as loud as I could." When When he heard me screaming for help, he left his garment beside me and ran outside. She put Joseph's garments beside her until the master came home. All right, so we look at this and we're seeing something. It's kind of straightforward. We know what she's doing. She's lying. She's covering up. I think she was very violent and desperate and wanting this to happen. And then when he fled and she had the garment, she was probably thinking, I'm probably in trouble now, so let me go ahead and, you know what, I'm tired of dealing with him. I want to get rid of him. Instead of going to the husband and saying, please sell him and get rid of him, she was going to make matters worse for him. She's a bit vindictive at this point in time with doing this. And she calls the other servants to be witness. Obviously, she's got the garment, so the story, she's kind of got some evidence to that. Now, look at what she's saying. What did her husband say? Look, my husband brought a Hebrew man. So it's kind of derogatory. She's putting down his nationality and who he is. Not that it matters if he's a servant, right? But at the same time, she's giving reason to throw him under the bus, so to speak, because he's Hebrew. You can't trust him. So she's setting it up. She's turning the tables on what what Joseph may say later on, right? So she's kind of throwing him under the bus. She tried to get physical with him, and it didn't work. She probably got to a point where she's like, I'm going to teach him a lesson. Okay, so centuries later, Paul commanded believers to do the same thing Joseph literally did when we look at 1 Corinthians 6:18. Flee sexual immorality. So Joseph's actions represents what we should do when it comes to sexual immorality, when it comes to sin. We need to flee that. We need to flee that temptation. We need to flee sin in every form as best as we can. We need to denounce it. The master of our house does not want that, right? And that's a hard thing to do. Sin is a hard thing to flee from. I understand that when our culture and our lives and our family, sometimes our workplace, it's hard to get away from it, right? We can't just run and flee and do nothing. But we can pray to God. We need to bring that concern to God and let him take care of it. Let him work through us and protect us. So I screamed loud as I could. The testimony of Potiphar's wife, along with the circumstantial evidence of Joseph's garment, kind of sealed his apparent guilt. So, the servants can simply say, well, I heard her screaming, and when I came in, I saw her with his garment. That is his garment. So, Joseph, what you got to say for yourself? Well, Joseph could easily say, well, for the past year, she's been trying to sleep with me, and I've said no. Well, whose word is it? It's going to be his word against hers. And of course, she's the wife of Potiphar. So now, question, what makes fleeing a temptation so difficult? I've kind of already said that, haven't you? It's difficult because it's so pervasive and it's so around us. We need to flee any temptation when possible. Now, that temptation can show itself among our friends, our family, TV, our workplace. Sometimes church is the only place that we would feel safe, but it's just one of those things where it's very hard for us to flee the temptation. However, we've got to know where we have those temptations. Do we have it when we watch TV all the time? Do we have it when we're always out in public going to specific places? Is it the people that we hang around? Is it the workplace that we hang around? Pray about that and see where God can help you with those areas that you're tempted. Okay? God's willing to help us in those areas if we let him. Okay? So, moving on. Verse 39, 17 through 21. Then she told him the same story. So now she's talking to her husband about this troublemaker, this Hebrew man. The Hebrew slave you brought to us came to make a fool of me. But when I screamed for help, he left his garment beside me and ran outside. When his master heard the story his wife told him, these are the things your slave did to me, he was furious and had thrown him into prison where the king's prisoners were confined. So Joseph was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him. He granted him favor with the prison warden. All right. So if this story sounds a little bit familiar, I get what you're saying. Because when I was reading this, her approach to telling Potiphar about the story reminds me a lot of the reproach that Eve would say in regards to Adam, right? So it's the same kind of attitude here. She's saying, look, the slave you brought us, it's your fault. You bought him and you brought it to this house. So, because look at what she's saying. So, when the master heard the story, his wife told him, quote unquote, these are the things your slave did to me. He was furious. So she kind of turned the tables. She made it out to seem like, Potiphar, it's your fault you hired this bad man. So it wasn't, forget the fact that this is a loyal, favored, hardworking servant of yours. You had no question, and you gave him everything in your household, every business of yours. Forget all that. Forget all the fact that he's a good person. He works hard for you. He's faithful and loyal. Forget all of that. He tried to sleep with me. So there just really wasn't, with this kind of argument, Potiphar, I mean, who's he going to believe? His wife, of his children, or a servant that he bought at a slave market? I mean, it's pretty much what it boiled down to. Joseph really didn't have much of an argument. He could say, no, that's not true. But if Potiphar had to sleep with his wife and not with the servant, he still had to deal with the wife and her story and her mouth and her, restless spirit. Rather than, it's just easier for him to get rid of Joseph, I believe, than to have to deal with an unhappy wife. So, is it kind of comical? No, it's not. But I kind of see, as you could see, anybody could see, we could see through the deception how she twisted the story to her favor, and how all of this sin and undoing brought down Joseph, and we probably think, man, she's going to get her just rewards. Well, the bottom line here, what gives me hope is, despite all of that, the Lord was with Jacob, or excuse me, Joseph, and extended kindness to him. So God kind of, even in their ups and downs, God's still with us, is he not? We see Joseph was on top of the mountain as head servant of this household, was he not? Now he's down in the valley, he's in prison. But yet God is still blessing and working with him, despite whether he's in the mountain or he's in the valley. So wherever Joseph is, God is with him and God is using him. Take that same application and use it on you. Whether you're on the mountain or you're in the valley, God is working with you and through you and showing you those kindness. He's working with you if you let him work with you. So he granted him favor with the prison warden. So even while he's in prison, God is still using him. God is still blessing him. Where is God using you in your life? Is he using you at work? Is he using you with your family? Is he using you at church? Where are these places that God is using you that you may feel that you don't belong, or you're unjustly there, or you're frustrated? Take a moment and think about those. A lot of times we get caught up in the fact we don't like our jobs, but we're probably there for a reason. And God's got you there for a reason. Let's find out what that is. So she's, like I said, she turned that around on him. Bible scholars often view it as a covenant term here when he's talking about the kindness. The word appears again, and Joseph appears as chief cupbearer to mention his plight to the Pharaoh to release him from prison. So we can see that going on. The favor can be translated into grace, the contrast of verbiage which arrives. This term focuses not on the giver of grace, the jailer, but on the one receiving the grace, which is Joseph. Okay, so like I said, I mean, that last verse kind of gives us, through and through, God is still going to be with them, right? It's not just because he's unjustly thrown in prison. It's because beyond the circumstances that we find ourselves in, God is still going to work with us, okay? Question: how does the way people deal with false accusations reveal their true character? Wow. Well, how do we deal with that? Obviously, if someone bears false witness against me, I'm going to speak out about that. Okay. Bottom line. There's some people who have no problem lying, and they will justify it in their hearts and have some reason, whatever twisted reason it may be. And there's just no helping that person. That's going to take God intervention for them to correct that way of thinking. But for the most part, when we deal with people and their false accusations, that reveals who they are. And when people lie about you, bear false witness, you're seeing who they truly are. And that may be because for several reasons. Could be that you're a Christian. Could be that you're nice. Could be it's your family. Could be that you've done something wrong to them. Who knows? But when we see false witness, we see what the person really is. And we just need to pray for those people and ultimately stay away from them. So, all right, so let's look at Kittner real quick and before we wrap up. The Kittner's got a pretty interesting little note here that we want to go through here. So, and we're talking about the whole chapter here with Kittner, okay? The symmetry of this chapter, in which scene opening is matched point for point at a new level in the close of the chapter, despite all that intervenes. Perfectly expresses God's quiet control and the man of faith's quiet victory. The good seed is buried deeper, still push upward. The servant, faithful in a little, trains for authority in much. So what we're seeing here is what Kittner's saying is, we look at the whole, if we understand the whole story of Joseph, which you do have, we're going to get more into it. But right now, Joseph is showing himself to be a faithful servant with a little, which is this household. Now, pretty soon, he's going to be control of a nation and all those nations around him. Okay? So Joseph is proving his worth, even if Potiphar's wife doesn't like it. Okay? He was at a point where Potiphar trusted with him with everything but to sleep with his wife. And we're talking everything. Business in the field, business in the house, his money. He did everything for Potiphar. Okay? But God saw that and God recognized that and said, I'm going to continue to bless you and show you kindness. So wrapping up, summarize. Believers must consider the consequences of giving in to temptation. Amen. Temptation and sin can really take us off course of what God really desires of us. Believers may need to flee from the situation to escape temptation. Flee it when you can, as often as you can, really. Believers can demonstrate trust in God when falsely accused. Yes, despite anything that is said against us, we can trust God that truth will come to light, the falsehoods will be revealed, and God will take care of us. And that's the most important thing in our lives, okay? All right, thank you for watching. I appreciate you dialing in for another one of the videos, as always. Thank you so much. Leave a comment below if you like. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel when you get a chance. As always, we'd love to have you here at Webb Baptist. We meet at Wednesday nights for our dinner, and then we have a Bible study afterwards. If you can't make it Wednesday nights, come to us on Sunday mornings. We have Sunday school class, our series that we're doing, and then we have our worship hour. And we'd love to have you here as this family. You'd be our honored guest. If you cannot make it to Webb Baptist, by all means, wherever you are, find a good Bible-based church and get plugged in with God's family. I guarantee you will be a blessing to them just as much as they will be a blessing to you. God has a plan for you. Whether right now you're on the mountain or you're in the valley, God has a plan for you. I guarantee you. Okay? Until next time, take care and God bless.